What if the most important skill you will ever develop in your entire life isn't a professional skill, isn't a technical skill, isn't something you learned in school or read in a business book, but the ability to recognize, respond to, and recover from the people who are slowly, systematically, and sometimes lovingly draining the life out of you? What if I told you that the exhaustion you've been carrying, the self-doubt that whispers to you at 2 a.m., the shrinking you do before you even walk into certain rooms, none of that is about you being too sensitive, too weak, or too broken? What if it's actually evidence that you've been in proximity to people who need you small because they cannot handle you whole? What if the smartest thing you could possibly do right now, today, in this moment, isn't to work harder, hustle more, or optimize your morning routine, but to finally, bravely, completely rethink who you are allowing into the sacred space of your one and only life? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share will not just change how you handle toxic people, it will fundamentally change how you understand yourself. And that is where real freedom begins. There is something I need to say to you before anything else, and I need you to really hear it, not just process it intellectually, but feel it somewhere in your body where the truth tends to land before your mind can argue with it. You are not too much. You have never been too much, but you have perhaps been too much for the wrong people. And that distinction, that seemingly small, seemingly simple distinction, is everything. I've spent years sitting with people in their most vulnerable moments, listening to the stories they've never told anyone, the ones they're ashamed of, the ones that keep them up at night. And across all of that research, across all of those conversations, one pattern emerged with such consistency, such heartbreaking regularity, that it became impossible to ignore. The most courageous, most empathetic, most genuinely loving people, the ones with the most to offer this world, are almost always the ones who have spent the most time in relationships that told them they were not enough. Not abusive people, not broken people, not people who should be written off. The most extraordinary people in the most ordinary pain. And here's what I discovered about how the wisest among them, the ones who not only survived, but genuinely transformed, here's what they did differently. They stopped performing okayness. You know what I mean by that? That smile you put on, that "I'm fine" that comes out before anyone even finishes asking how you are. That way you've learned to make your pain smaller, tidier, more palatable for the people around you, including and especially the people who are causing it. Smart people, truly smart people, emotionally intelligent people, they stop doing this. Not because they stop caring about others, but because they finally understand something profound. Pretending to be okay in the presence of someone who is hurting you is not kindness. It's abandonment, self-abandonment. And self-abandonment has a cost. It accumulates silently every time you swallow your truth to keep the peace. Every time you let a comment slide because confronting it feels too exhausting. Every time you make yourself responsible for managing someone else's emotional chaos while your own goes completely unattended. That cost shows up eventually in your body, in your relationships, in the growing distance between who you are and who you're becoming. Smart people pay attention to that distance. They treat it as data. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. And I believe in going to the uncomfortable places because that's precisely where growth lives. What if you have played a role in this? Not in the way toxic people want you to believe, not by being too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional, but in a deeper, more honest, more compassionate way. What if somewhere in your history you learned that love comes with conditions, that you must perform or shrink or achieve or please or fix in order to be worthy of belonging? Because here's what I know from research and from real human stories. We don't accidentally end up in toxic dynamics repeatedly. We arrive there through patterns, and patterns have origins. Smart people do this work. The terrifying, uncomfortable, absolutely necessary work of asking, where did I first learn that this was love? Where did I first learn that my needs were inconvenient? Where did I learn that keeping someone else comfortable was more important than keeping myself whole? These are not easy questions. They will make you cry. They will make you angry. They might unravel things you built your entire identity around, but they will also set you free in ways that nothing, no motivational speech, no productivity hack, no carefully worded boundary setting script ever could. Because freedom from toxic people doesn't begin when they leave your life. It begins when you understand why you let them stay so long. Let's talk about boundaries because I think we've been getting this completely wrong. The word boundary has been overused, misused, and turned into something that sounds clinical and cold when it is actually, at its core, one of the most generous, loving things you can do for yourself and for others. Here's what a boundary actually is. It's a clear statement of what you will and will not participate in. It's not a punishment, it's not a threat, it's not a weapon you use to control others. A boundary is simply this: knowing where you end and where someone else begins. And smart people, people who handle toxic dynamics with genuine intelligence, they've learned that boundaries without consequences are just requests. Requests that toxic people will ignore every single time because they've learned that your boundaries are negotiable. They're negotiable because you've taught them to be negotiable. Every time you said, I can't allow this, and then allowed it anyway. Every time you extended one more chance after the last chance. Every time you explained, justified, reasoned, and begged for someone to choose to treat you differently. You communicated something devastating, that your standards are flexible, that your peace is optional, that your worth is something to be debated. Smart people stop negotiating their worth, not with arrogance, not with coldness, but with a bone-deep clarity that says, I know what I deserve, and I am no longer willing to accept anything less, regardless of how much I love you. And that is one of the hardest sentences a human being can live by. Because sometimes the people we love the most are the ones we need to hold the firmest limits with. I want to address the guilt, because if you've been around toxic people, you know guilt like it's an old roommate. It's familiar. It might even feel like home in some twisted way. You feel guilty for setting limits. You feel guilty for saying no. You feel guilty for protecting your peace because you've been conditioned to believe that your protection is somehow their persecution. Let me say this as clearly as I possibly can. Guilt that comes from protecting yourself from someone who is harming you is not your moral compass speaking. It is their conditioning working exactly as they designed it. Real guilt, healthy guilt, is what you feel when you've genuinely harmed someone, when you've acted against your own values, when you've caused real damage through your own choices. Manufactured guilt, the kind toxic people specialize in creating, is what you feel when you stop making yourself available for their dysfunction. These two things feel identical in your body, which is why smart people have developed the practice of pausing before the guilt, examining it honestly and asking, did I actually do something wrong here? Or did I simply stop doing something that was wrong to me? That pause, that honest, courageous examination, that's where everything begins to shift. There's something I want you to understand about the grief that comes after leaving toxic people, because I think we've been doing this part all wrong. We treat the grief as a sign we made the wrong decision. We treat the tears, the longing, the moments of, but there were good times too, as evidence that we should go back, as proof that maybe it wasn't that bad, as confirmation that we are too dramatic, too unforgiving, too unable to see the good in people. We've been confusing grief with regret, and they are not the same thing. When you remove someone from your life, even someone who was genuinely hurting you, you don't just lose the bad parts. You lose the whole person. You lose the version of them you loved. You lose the version of the future you imagined. You lose the relationship you wished it could have been if only they had chosen differently. That loss is real. That grief is legitimate. Smart people don't try to skip it or speed it up or perform their healing for social media. They sit with it, they honor it, they give themselves permission to be human about it. And then slowly, imperfectly, non-linearly, they begin to build something new. Not a harder version of themselves, not a closed off, defensive, trust no one version, but a wiser, more boundaried, more radically honest version of themselves. Someone who loved fully, got hurt deeply, and chose, with everything they had, to remain open to the world anyway. That is not weakness. That is some of the most profound courage I have ever witnessed. And finally, here's the truth that I want you to carry with you long after this moment is over. The toxic relationships you have survived, every single one of them, have been trying to teach you something that no comfortable relationship ever could. They have shown you exactly where your boundaries were absent. They have revealed the places where you learned to abandon yourself. They have forced you into a level of self-examination that, painful as it is, has made you more self-aware, more emotionally sophisticated, more deeply human than you ever could have become in the comfortable, unchallenging spaces of easy relationships. You have been in the fire, and fire either destroys you or transforms you. And the fact that you are still here, still seeking, still growing, tells me everything about which one it did to you. Smart people don't just handle toxic people by avoiding them or confronting them or cutting them off. Smart people handle toxic people by refusing to let the experience make them smaller, by doing the inner work that the pain is demanding, by emerging from the experience more authentically, more courageously, more luminously themselves than they were before, by understanding that the way someone treated you is a statement about them. But how you treat yourself in the aftermath, that is the only statement about you that has ever mattered. So here is where I leave you. Not with a neat, packaged list of steps, because your healing has never been that simple, and pretending otherwise would be a disrespect to everything you've been through. I leave you with this. You deserve relationships where you don't have to shrink, where you don't have to rehearse conversations, where you don't have to brace yourself before picking up the phone, where your presence is a gift that is recognized and honored, not a resource to be extracted. You deserve to take up space, full, gloriously imperfect, beautifully human space in your own life. And the moment you begin to truly believe that, not perform believing it, not intellectually agree with it, but feel it in the deepest, most honest part of yourself, is the moment everything begins to change. The toxic people in your life didn't create your wounds, but they did find them. And now you get to heal them, not for anyone else, not to prove anything, not to become some perfect, unaffected, unbothered version of yourself, but simply to come home to who you always were, before anyone told you that you were too much, not enough, or anything less than completely, beautifully worthy of a life that actually feels like yours. That journey, messy and brave and real as it is, begins exactly here, exactly now, with you.